Hello everyone, and we're only 5 days into the fall equinox and we already have some wintry updates for you, so we'll just jump in and I'll tell you all about what you can expect for the rest of your weekend. Now, let's see here. Now, as we jump ahead, our first freeze for Fairbanks, are we going to have that this weekend? I think so. I think we're going to have that tonight, and that's pretty exciting. We also have a winter weather advisory on the way across the interior, and those go hand in hand. And then southeast storms are dissipating, so you don't have to worry about those any longer. We're going to have a little bit of a break with some lighter showers moving in for Sunday. And of course, our photo for our weather headlines today from Margie. So thank you, Margie, for our beautiful picture in Soldotna. Now, as we look ahead into the latest first freezes so far this season, and just across the board for Fairbanks, we're already within the top 3. Now, if we don't get that first freeze by tonight, then that's going to make it the second latest freeze of the season. But if we're able to get that by tonight, then we tie the record for 1974. So we're going to see how that's looking, but I would bet money on it that we're going to have the first freeze in Fairbanks for tonight. Now, looking ahead, our earliest on the record was on August 3rd, so we're still obviously way past that, not worrying about that too much. But then we have this cold air mass moving across for the interior and across from the north slope, and that is a really big puzzle into the story for why we're seeing some wintry mixes moving in for the interior. So this colder air mass is also going to be a huge reason why we have the special weather statement, why we're expecting some snow accumulation for the interior. So we're going to expect to see just about a trace, so about less than an inch specifically for Fairbanks, but the Fairbanks Bowl can range from about ½ inch to 1.5 inches. So across the interior, we're expecting to see between ½ inch to 2 inches of snow moving on through, and that's pretty exciting, and that's all because of that large cold air mass dropping those temperatures to below freezing, and that of course helps with bringing our first snow accumulation of the season into the interior. Now, we already know that this is spanning up into the north slope, so that's going to be pretty exciting moving on through, but of course those higher elevation regions are much more likely to get a little bit heavier rounds of snow moving on through. So you're going to expect to see that overnight and moving into Sunday as well. So looking ahead, just what we've got going on weather-wise, we have this big low-pressure system sitting in the Gulf of Alaska, and the Gulf of Alaska seems to be pretty much the home base for where these storms start to occur, and that's why we've been seeing so many storms rolling into southeast and just all of the rain and the heavy winds happening in southeast. But a nice break, you won't have to deal with that too much, because if you look closely for southeast, it's going to be mostly dry heading into Sunday. Now, you will have rain in southeast, but what I'm saying is that you're going to have much less rain compared to what you've been seeing. So that's going to start to taper off. Lighter to scattered showers are expected for southeast, and then of course the interior, you're expecting to see some rounds of snow moving on through for going into overnight hours and then also going into Sunday. But of course those rounds of snow are most likely for those higher elevation regions. So it's just pretty interesting to see the rounds of wintry mixes happening already. And of course, western Alaska seeing very, very dry conditions. It's completely dry on the western half of Alaska. So we're going to continue to see those conditions moving on through. If you're in the western Alaska, you get to enjoy those sunnier skies just a bit longer. So make sure you take in as much as you can while it's lasting. Now, with our wind gusts so far just from today, those wind gusts in southeast, of course, are dying out a lot more than what we were seeing last week. We were seeing those wind gusts up to 60 and 70 miles per hour, hurricane force winds, but now they're dropping down quite a bit. So by Sunday, the highest wind gust you can expect to see is about 25 miles per hour, but winds are going to typically range about 10 to 15 miles per hour for southeast. So that's how you know you're catching a break from those storms. But then of course, western through the Aleutians is a completely different story. We've got another low pressure system moving on through the Aleutians. That's what's bringing in that gale force warning, and that's why you're seeing all those high wind counts for the Aleutians. So pretty strong winds moving on through, but like I said, those stormy conditions in southeast are really starting to dry off with our expected rainfall less than an inch, which is a nice change compared to what we've been seeing. You know, we've been seeing 1 to 2 inches expected pretty much per day last week, so pretty crazy conditions over in southeast. But I'm glad to know that everybody's doing okay, and you know, we checked in with the emergency management team over there throughout the week, and we were making sure everything was okay. So luckily the worst is over as of this week, and things are starting to dry off for Sunday. So you can expect a little bit calmer conditions moving into Sunday, and then with your temperatures still staying in the 50s, so you're still staying warm, considering all of those showers and just stormy conditions that you were facing, but those wind gusts are staying relatively low compared to what we had been seeing. Now the interior, I'm excited to say, is on the way for some snow accumulation. You can just see that right there with all of our snowy icons. We're expecting that throughout most of the region, of course, and then certain areas are going to get more snow than others. It goes without saying, but those temperatures are really cooling down. I mean, those highs just in the 30s. And then, of course, look at that low temperature for Fairbanks, reaching 30 degrees by tonight. So that first freeze is on the way. It's coming your way. So tomorrow we'll check in again, and I'm super excited to hear what everyone has to say about how that goes. But that's finally here. So if that happens tonight officially, it'll be the second latest freeze of the season. Now for the North Slope, temperatures, of course, staying really cold, near freezing, and then Anaktuvik Pass staying significantly colder, but those conditions, mostly sunny, mostly cloudy skies moving on through. In western Alaska, still staying pretty dry with mostly sunny skies for those more interior portions of western Alaska, but mostly cloudy skies for those coastal regions. Temperatures staying in the 30s and 40s. Now for the Aleutians, you're going to get some rain tomorrow, and that's from that low pressure system that I had mentioned that's going to start moving on in. Some of those more western and central islands are going to see a lot more rain than others. And of course, those wind gusts are at gale force. So of course, be aware of that, but just know that that storm system is going to start to move through the Alaska Peninsula heading into Monday. So that's kind of what we've got going on, but temperatures staying around 50 degrees, and south central staying mostly sunny for the Kenai Peninsula, and then moving on through to the Copper River Basin. We're seeing a little bit of cloudier conditions with Whittier, just seeing some very light rain moving on through, but temperatures staying in the low 50s to high 40s, but Matsu seeing 50 across the board. That's what you can expect, and then those partly sunny to partly cloudy skies, and Anchorage is seeing those temperatures just close enough to 50 degrees, but those lows getting into the 30s, so we are dipping down in temperature, but we haven't reached our first freeze just yet. Now, our first freeze for Anchorage typically happens around the 23rd of September, so we're a few days overdue. We'll see what next week is looking like for some of those first freeze, but as of our 7-day, it doesn't look like we're going to reach that this week, but maybe the week after. We'll see. We'll keep you updated with that, but those sky conditions for Sunday are going to stay pretty sunny, so make sure you get outside and take advantage of those mostly sunny skies for Sunday while they last, because we are getting into the time of year where we have more darkness than daylight, and of course that's only going to increase as we progress into the winter season. But for Fairbanks, very exciting. I got to do the honor of doing the first snowflake for the 7-day. So our Sunday is looking pretty mixed with rain and snow, but very light for Fairbanks. Don't expect a whole snowstorm. It's just going to be some very light precipitation happening, but a mixture of rain and snow. And then those temperatures dipping down into the 30s, and then those lows predicting going into our first freeze by tonight. And then of course Sunday night getting even colder into the mid-20s. So should be pretty interesting. It's already been a pretty interesting Saturday, full of very interesting weather patterns. I see what everyone's talking about why Alaska is pretty difficult to predict for, because there's just so much happening in such a big state. But of course, it's a beautiful state, and with that, even in our fall season, even if we're getting those wintry conditions, it's still beautiful, and we can already see that outside with our fall foliage. So with that, I'll let everybody go and have a great Saturday night, and we'll check in on Sunday, see if that first freeze officially happened. I'll have more updates for you on that, but I'll check in tomorrow. I hope everybody has a great night.